If you grew up watching Sesame Street in its early days, there's something you may remember about it that younger generations may not. It was really black. From the jive talk,
In Majesty dig it, I can rhyme anything,
to the soul and funk music, to the set and cast, Sesame Street seemed to have a very specific demographic in mind: black and brown inner city kids. Well, did you know that those kids were the whole reason that Sesame Street was created in the first place?
Our target audience were inner city children, and the bullseye of the target audience were inner city black children.
I'm Dara Starr Tucker, and this is The Breakdown. Sesame Street, which premiered in 1969, was unlike any show that had come before it. It was one of the original shows to appear on the fledgling PBS network. Children's television up to that point was essentially an electronic babysitter, and a questionable one at that. Young viewers were a prime target for advertisers who wanted to sell candy, toys, cereal, you name it, to a willing audience. They were barraged with cartoons, clown shows, and afternoon serials that had little redeeming value. Studies indicated that children were spending half their day in front of the TV, but it was even worse for black and brown inner city children. Their parents often had jobs that required them to be away for large swaths of time. They were often being exposed to mindless programming at a higher rate than their middle-class counterparts. Enter Lloyd Morissette. He's widely regarded as the father of Sesame Street. Lloyd had graduated with a PhD in experimental psychology from Yale University. He had excelled in the field of education and later became the vice president of the Carnegie Corporation, where he began to develop a special interest in children's education, particularly the disparities between middle-class children and black and brown children in the inner city. Through the Carnegie Corporation's research, they found that inner city children started out months behind middle-class children in kindergarten, and the gap grew wider and wider as they advanced through later grades. Morissette wanted to figure out how to make a real difference where this troubling statistic was concerned, and he thought that television might be the answer. He knew the learning gap would need to be addressed early on, even before children reached school age, but he was running into a lot of resistance in the staunch academic environment in which he was entrenched. They looked down on TV, called it the boob tube, and dismissed it entirely. Most of his colleagues didn't even own televisions, so they didn't understand his vision for how children's educational television could make a difference for children who needed it the most. So he reached out to an associate of his named Joan Gance Cooney. She had been a young activist in the 1960s who watched the civil rights movement unfold and felt a very deep connection to the social justice issues that it had shone a light on. She worked for the local public television station in New York City, Channel 13, as a documentary producer. Lloyd Morissette asked Joan if she thought it was possible for children's television to teach young children.
The kids just adored the medium, and so why not see if it could educate them.
Clearly, children were responding to the catchy theme songs, TV jingles, and slogans that they were hearing on television every day. Why couldn't that same approach work to get them to learn those critical early educational concepts like phonics and arithmetic that would actually do them some good? So Lloyd Morissette and Joan Gance Cooney set out to put this theory into action. He hired Joan to do a feasibility study called The Potential Uses of Television in Preschool Education. This study was used to convince the Department of Education, the Carnegie Corporation, the Ford Foundation, and private donors to give $8 million to establish the Children's Television Workshop, now known as the Sesame Workshop. It was unlike anything that had existed before it. A group of writers, TV producers, educators, curriculum, and behavioral specialists who were all working in tandem to develop a show that was both educational and entertaining. Joan reached out to a writer and TV producer named John Stone, a Yale University graduate who had experience in children's television. He shared her passion for social activism and agreed to do the show because of its specific focus on educating black and brown children. In fact, John was the one who came up with the idea to create a set that mimicked an inner city New York neighborhood. He even named the show Sesame Street. John had worked with a puppeteer named Jim Henson during his time as a TV producer. He knew Jim's whole ethos fit with the subversive counterculture vibe of the late 60s, and he hoped that Jim could help give the show a hipness that no other children's television show had. They brought Joe Raposo on as the musical director, and their specific brand of television magic was born. Along with the Smothers Brothers, Laugh-In, and the Flip Wilson Show, Sesame Street captured the cultural zeitgeist in a way that was unheard of for a children's television show. College students were even watching it. Now, the integrated nature of the show didn't get past southern stations. The Jackson, Mississippi affiliate station even removed Sesame Street from its airwaves for a time because of complaints from parents.
Sesame Street, it is integrated racially, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you think that had anything to do with the tabling, if that's what we can call it accurately, of Sesame Street? The fact that it heavily integrated, that there is a black father figure in the program?
That's an extremely difficult question for me.
John Stone and the show's other creators never really made a huge issue of the fact that the show celebrated black and brown life so overtly.
What has been the impact of the special things that you've done, the integrated cast, as you've seen it.
That really speaks for itself on the air. We've never beaten that horse to death by talking about it. We simply show it.
But I'm sure it didn't escape some of the show's more observant viewers that one of its signature songs is an ode to learning to love the skin that you were born in.
It's not easy being green. Having to live each day the color of the leaves.
It's hard to imagine in this day and age that Sesame Street could be considered controversial. Thankfully, there was a small group of thinkers and dreamers who were willing to put their values on the line and make a real investment in the cultivation of a more just society for everyone.
There's no question that we're integrated, and we reflect to some degree inner city, I would say black inner city life, and we're very proud of that. I mean, if that's our worst sin, I'm happy to be a sinner.